outstanding poet and writer, Nikki Giovanni. And Miss Giovanni was here in Knoxville for a recent event. Do you mind telling us what you did at your event?
Well, I was one of the poets, I think, in the Big Ear event.
Okay.
And usually that's a musical festival. And so I was so excited to be invited. Knoxville is my home. I was born here. So I was very excited to be invited and to come over. And we did some talking because I like to talk. And poetry is a storytelling event,
Yes.
essentially. And so I could read some poems and could talk about growing up in Knoxville. And I didn't grow up in Knoxville so much as I came back to Knoxville as an early teenager and lived with my grandparents on. It no longer exists on Mulvaney Street. It's now Hall of Fame
Yeah.
Drive. But it's always nice to come back home. It really is.
Do you still feel like Knoxville is your home?
Yeah, I was laughing because I read one of the papers that when I did an interview with somebody, and he asked me that question. I said, well, anytime you see me say home, it's always Knoxville. I really don't ever think. And I grew up, actually, I guess it's fair to say in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But I really, when I say home, it's always Knoxville. Yeah.
It's remarkable to me. In your book, I'm able to see how you lived in Knoxville, but you also got to go to northern states. You talk about Cincinnati. You talk about the difference between them as well. And some of the most interesting parts to me, since we have ended the time of segregation, is seeing how you're able to talk about the growth that has happened in America. One of my favorite quotes was actually when you are talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that he is the personification of the 60s. And in that, you kind of talk about how he was willing to risk everything to make a change in America. Would you feel that his dreams and aspirations are starting to come true in today's society?
Well, I think that nothing is free. But let's start with that. I'm a lot older than the 60s. I'm 70. You and I are speaking, I'm 78 years old. Nothing is free and nothing is easy. So when we talk about Martin having a dream, he really was. We have to remember that speech started with, "We are here to cash a check."
Yes.
And I think that's a very important part of that speech because it's going to be Mahalia Jackson, who she called him Doc, who's going to say, "Doc, tell him about the dream." And of all of the people on the platform that day, Mahalia was the only star. And I say that because she had spent her life, and being the only star on the road, on that stage, she was the one that recognized all of those people at the mall. They needed something more.
Yes.
They did not need to be told, this is what America needs. Everybody knew that. What they needed was an idea and a hope. And that's when she said, Doc, tell him about the dream, which he'd done that speech before. And he did, and that's what lifted the crowd up. I think that America still has a long way to go. I think that the fears of white people have been improperly addressed, that you have a former president like Donald Trump who is essentially evil.
Yeah.
And I think that what he's trying to do, he and Putin are trying to do with the world is to change the world and make it less a living world. That must be a better word but they've done so
Less
much.
inclusive.
Yeah, they've really done so much to pull people down.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a shame because one, war is a bad idea, and war is over. So Putin is going to drop bombs and drop bombs and drop bombs, and we may end up in war, but yet and still we know how that's going to end because the Nazis always lose.
Yes.
They've never won a war,
Yes.
and they're not going to win one now. And it upset me. I said to my class the other day, I'm still teaching, and I said, I'm going to write Putin a letter because I had wanted this summer to go on a river cruise in Eastern Europe, and you can't do that now because stupid war. And I know that there are other reasons to be upset with Putin, but I saved up 2 years for this for that trip. And he's ruining my vacation. I said, and my class just cracked up and said, Nikki, you can't say that. I said, I think somebody should let him know that you ruined my vacation and you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Yes, you're ruining so many things. I mean, it's such a tragic loss of life and loss of hope that's going on, you know?
And for what? For what? And so you're trying to do something that was done, what, 2,000 years ago? It's not gonna work.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's gonna happen with Ukraine any more than we know what's gonna happen when we looked at Hitler, any more than Donald Trump was trying to overthrow the 2020 election. None of these things are gonna happen. A lot of people are going to die fighting against it, and we're going to die anyway, so we may as well die for something. And I think that that's the way the Ukrainians feel about their country. That's the way a lot of us felt in the 1960s when we were walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. A lot of us felt like, well, if I have to die, I'd rather die doing something than doing
Absolutely.
nothing.
And the current unit that I'm teaching is actually around Frederick Douglass. And so the fact that you bring that up, I mean, we're focusing on how he has that turning point in his life where he says, I'm no longer going to sit and take it. And if that means that I'm going to die, at least I'm going to die with what my soul needs, you know. My friend Angelica, when I told her I was doing this interview, she said, well, if you talk to her, ask her how she thinks different groups could get together to help ban against injustice. So I know in the 1960s there was an attempt between the Hispanic community and the Black community to try to band together. Do you have any ideas about how all of these different groups of leaders could come together to help push for change?
No, the only, maybe if you'd asked me this 50 years ago, I would have been thinking differently. But what I see now is maybe we won't change the world, but we can't let the world change us.
Yes.
And I say that to my students. You can't let the world change you. That's what you have to be aware of. And I think that the Black community, for example, owes an allegiance to the transgender community.
Yes.
Because the transgender community is being treated exactly
How
as we
were.
were being treated. Sure, they're getting beat up. They're not being allowed to sit on the lunch counters. They're not being allowed to go to the bathroom. They're being treated the same way we are. And I think that we, of necessity, need to speak up for them. Now, I'm not aware of, I don't want to, in fact, join a group.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that. But I am interested because all I have are words. And using my words to say, no, we owe them a good word. These youngsters are moving into the future. I happen to be a space freak. I'm totally in love.
I read
with
about that with Star Trek as well. Like
I love the idea of the galaxy, and we are more and more as we're learning. We are going to have, I would imagine, some level of human life in the galaxy. I'm not talking about in space because we're in space. We know that.
Yeah.
And we're going to run into another life form in the galaxy. And a part of what we're going to do when we find that other life form is we're going to mate, because that's what any living thing does. I was sitting there day before yesterday now. I was at I had a framer, and the birds were out because it was such a pretty day, and the birds were mating. I said, oh my goodness. they're, and I was amazed because I'd never seen birds mate, and of course she'll go and have the eggs. That's going to be one of the questions. I'm sincere about that. One of the questions we're going to have with any other life form is how do you mate? And the other question that always comes up is, and what do you eat? Which is why it's so important for Black women to be in the galaxy, because Black women, you just run into Black women all the time. You know, did you have something to eat, baby? But you eat, and that's what we do. And I think that it's important that we recognize that change is continuing to come, and that you can't decide what somebody else is. We've had, you talk about wars. We've had wars over who you should worship, all of that. But you can decide. I'm tired of being a woman. I want to change that. Why wouldn't you? What business is it of mine how you want to describe yourself?
Yes.
It's none of my business.
I think your word choice, and I pulled this out, I don't know where it was, but you said, you were talking about, oh, here we go. For me, the noun is Black. American is the adjective. And for me, that was so moving, and just to say, like, this is not what describes a person. You can't just, that's a noun that describes me. There are millions of nouns that describe me as a person. And trying to put a label on that, you're not getting to the soul of who I am, you know? And I mean, what you say about black women, so me personally, I always thought I had wonderful food, and then I married my husband, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to cook. You know, and seeing like his mother come in, and it's just like she walks into the room and everybody just explodes with joy, you know. And the first thing they do is they sit down and they're like, okay, so what are we going to eat? What's going to be our layup? Let's get this all together so that we can get started planning. And I've just never seen that interconnectedness, you know. So when you're saying it's going to be a black woman, I completely agree, because I have seen my mother, and I have seen how she's able to just transform a room with food and with her laughter and with her kindness. And to say that she is just a black American, no, no. And the fact that you're able to pull that out about how labels do not define us. And a lot of people nowadays are just trying to label every single category and trying to build on those categories with political divisiveness. And
It's why they're trying to own you. And it's one of the reasons that, personally speaking, which again is my business and not anybody else's, I support abortion because I can make a decision what to do with my life. And men, and there's never been a pregnant man until we get one, they need to shut up. Men, men go around, well, I don't believe in abortion. Well, you believe in sex.
yes. So
So if
that's
you
the
don't like one,
consequence.
you don't like it. But you get, excuse me, you just get tired of people deciding who you are when you have every right to make that decision yourself. And we're still fighting for, essentially, for women to be in certain jobs because, well, look, right now we've got Justice Brown.
Yes.
And they're more upset because she's a woman, I think, than because she's black. And I remember when Ruth Ginsburg, they were upset. They were more upset because she was a woman than that she was Jewish.
Yeah.
And both of those women were quite brilliant. And of course, I don't mind saying, and you certainly may quote me, I really just hope every day that Clarence Thomas joins Antonin Scalia in hell, and they talk about what they tried to do. No, I'm so glad when his wife is a traitor to the United States. That's sedition, right? He is with his wife, and you're not going to tell me that he doesn't know that she was trying to overthrow the government.
Yeah.
She did. And the last time that we did anything meaningful, we hanged Aaron Burr. So we could hang a few other people.
And that's been quite a while since.
So we've been missing it.
Like
Obviously, you know, hanging people is a good idea because they've hanged a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we live here, we in Knoxville, we live here in Appalachia. And a lot of white women in Appalachia who stood up for these slaves got hanged. And there's a story that everybody wants to quiet. And I'm 78. And so if we don't, and I say that to my students, if you're not talking to your grandmothers or your great-grandmothers, they're going to be gone. And a lot of these stories, you're not going to hear. You're going to find little books that they're going to say, you know, Anne was killed. I mean, you know, there are things that tell what was going on because I have the highest regard for Appalachian whites than any other whites in the United States. But we know that there were people who didn't like him. And we've seen people, we saw it in Charlottesville. We saw a white guy who says, I love white people, run a car into a white woman and kill her.
Yeah.
Did we not? And so it's time that these stories came out. It's time that we talked about where are we going and who gets to decide how we get there. And I think we deserve our own bodies.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's super touching that you talk about people who have tried to make movements and tried to make change. When I'm discussing with my kids and we're going over, you know, Frederick Douglass, and we start talking about how laws are implemented after him, you know, and we talk about the NAACP and we talk about how all these stages add up, you know. And the one thing that always gets them is when I say, well, you know that there wasn't actually legal marriage between a black person and a white person until almost the 70s. Oh, I don't remember his name
Yeah, I think
either.
it was John. It wasn't until he decided, he thought he was a white man, that he wanted to marry Mildred. And they said, no, that's against the law. Well, if he had said, I want to sleep with her, and I'm just going to, yeah, that's a good idea. We want to have children. Don't worry about it. But he said, I want to marry her. I want to give her my name. I want the world to know I love her. They kicked the doors down in the middle of the night and arrested him. It's against the law. And so he decided, and rightfully so, I am going to marry this woman. If it's good enough for Edward the Sixth, if the King of England can say, I'm going to give up this throne, I can fight this law. And of course, Loving versus Virginia is what opened the door for all of that. And I'm so glad, because he had a right to marry who he wants. What do they care?
Yeah, and I mean, without them being able to marry, he doesn't have that privilege if something were to happen. He doesn't have that privilege if she ends up in the hospital. All of that falls on somebody else. And I mean, logistically, that's why you want that marriage certificate. You want the person who you trust the most to be in your corner and to have legal verification of it. And I think it's kind of symbolic that his name was Loving, you know, that
that was very funny.
Because that is the focus.
I want that. I've been wanting it, but nobody listens to poets. I've wanted that on our license plate.
Yes.
Loving versus Virginia. I just think it, because right now our license plates, and I say our because I live in Virginia, says Virginia's for lovers, but it isn't. Virginia should be for loving.
Yes. And that, I mean, that's inspirational, because look at how much that changed the face of America.
And it needed to.
And so few people actually know who they are. And that's so
Mildred
shocking.
just died recently, within last year.
I actually, so I saw you in college, and I tried to get to speak to you. You were at Tennessee Tech, and I raced up, and it was so many people, you know, and I didn't get to speak to you. And then now, as an adult, because I say adult because I'm out of college, you know, I'm rereading it, and I've just made a list, and I'm like a third of the way through, but all of the people that you have put in this book, for you to have so much knowledge of so many movements and such an understanding of how America has been formed and changed and is still changing.
It's still changing and will continue to change. And that's what I think we all need to. There is no such, it's over. It's all right. We will. Earth will continue. I was looking last night at the sinkholes, because I do a lot with water. My last couple of books have been on water. And of course, Florida is going to just go away. And I've given Florida maybe a decade, probably less, because there's nothing but sinkholes. And they're saying, well, we got to do something about these sinkholes, because we really don't, human beings are uncomfortable.
I'm just fixing it. Sorry. There we go.
These are you damn dummies. You can't take all of the land and decide what you want to do with it. Of course you have sinkholes, because you built dams, you dug the water, you changed the way the water, of course you do. And of course you have, Florida is just really one big sinkhole. I'm even looking at it. And I live on a mountain, and I'm not worried. But when it storms, you're always aware. I don't live at the top of a high mountain, thank God. But you're aware that a good storm will bring some of that mountain down, because we've cut too many of the trees down.
Yeah.
You can't keep cutting trees down. And I live with a bunch of groundhogs, and I do. And they messed up my garden last year. But there's nothing you can do. The groundhogs have to live, as do the squirrels, as do everything has to live. And that's what human beings don't seem to understand, that we share a life. This is not ours. This is a place that we are a part of. And it's very hard to get people to understand that.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the biggest human flaws is to be egocentric, to just be focused on your major goal. And I actually recently did an interview with a water engineer. And she was talking about how she tried to come upon what she wanted to do. And she said, I realized in every type of class and everything I was doing, water is the central focus of what keeps the world going.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can go. I mean, I happen to be a Christian, so for those who are, it's not personal. But Jesus did go 40 days and 40 nights without food. But he couldn't go 40. You can
Yeah.
only, you can only go 4 days without water, and you're going to dehydrate. You're going to die dead. And people need to realize that. And you can't decide. Well, and we're here in Knoxville, and this is home. But I want to put a housing project here. So I'm going to change the creek. I'm going to change how the Clinch River goes. What are you going to get from that? Ultimately, you're going to get a sinkhole. I know what you're going to get. You're going to get a sinkhole. You're going to wake up one day in the middle of the day or something, and the trucks are going to fall in, or the bridges are going to fall over, and everybody's going to say, why did that happen? It's because you have disrupted Mother Nature. It's so basic. I'll be gone because I'm old. But that's exactly. Look at what they've done to the Clinch River. And I grew up in Cincinnati on the Ohio River. Look at how filthy it is. And if you read Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is not that great a book in my opinion, but nonetheless, Liza could cross the Ohio River from Kentucky to Ohio because she had ice.
Yeah.
She could walk across the ice. There's no ice on there.
No, because of all the pollution.
Yeah. And talk to the polar bears. They're losing in Antarctica. They're losing ice all over the place. We're going to eventually, unfortunately, I believe, lose the polar bear. And that's because we've decided that we have this garbage and we don't know what to do with it. It's like, are you kidding?
I was talking the other night with some of my friends, and they were like, yeah, our biggest idea is just to build a bridge to Hawaii. And I was like, well, it actually could be a good idea if you made that bridge a collector of plastic. And just made it a really long walkway, and underneath the walkway, you're just collecting all of the plastic. And we'll just say, look, America is a trendsetter. Instead of spending our money on war, we're spending our money on collecting plastic and trying to save the future of our world.
That would be funny.
The idea of something like that happening is just
impossible, of course, because we don't know what the bottom of the ocean is.
And there are kids nowadays that are trying to lead trends in fixing things. I know that there was a kid who recently made a patent for like this big circular garbage collector that you just float out into the middle of the ocean, and it just pulls all of the garbage and trash in. And this kid's trying to push to get this patented and to make it free for different countries to be able to use it. And all of a sudden, his information starts disappearing, And you come up with these ideas on how things could be changed or how things could be fixed, and then all of the politics just...
Yeah, you get sick of that. Well, you really get sick of the politicians. It's not a good idea. It might have been at some point, but it isn't anymore.
I was recently talking with Nikki Grimes in an interview with her, and she said, yeah, when they're talking about book banning and they're talking about all of these changes, it starts with a massive list. And the people who have put together this list, they haven't actually read all of those books. They just see a synopsis and they say, well, we're going to just add to this list instead of what should we take off of this list? Or why are we creating a list to take out of schools in the first place?
That's to me, that's what it is. Books should not be there. Books are there, you read them or you don't. But they should be there and they should be available to our students. And if I may say so, teachers, I am not a teacher, but teachers need raises. I don't know why we pay the senators and the House of Representatives and the governors all of that money that we pay them, and they don't do any good, and we don't pay teachers enough. And teachers are actually going out on a second job to get pencils for their kids.
Yeah.
I think that's a disgrace. And we need to pay our librarians more.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, these are important people. And we're having a problem right now at Virginia Tech because they're going to start charging for spring practice. Football, football, we're a big football team. And they want to charge the kids $5 to watch
the practices.
Practice, which is insane. I take $1 million, the coach makes $4 million. Take $1 million away from him and make sure it stays free.
Yeah. I mean, the kids are already paying so much for tuition, like...
No matter what.
You're not going to get nearly the same input from student participation.
We pay coaches who are... The last one that we had, Fuentes, was stupid, and that would understate it. For the first time, we never went to a bowl. It wasn't even that good. And we're paying him some $4 million. And then we're going to ask the kids to make up the difference.
Crazy. Well, since we're speaking about kids, I had one of my students, she is a poet as well. Her name is Cami, and she wanted me to ask you, do you have any inspirational words for young poets who are just trying to get started?
Well, I think the main thing is to realize if you're a poet, you are not going to make money because poets don't make money.
Yes.
So that takes a big burden off of you. Most of the great poets in the world, not America, but in the world, period, have not been known to be great until at least 50 to 100 years. So you don't have to worry about being great
Yeah.
because you'll be dead before anybody knows that you are. And you have to read something. Every day you need to read something.
Absolutely.
You don't need to write something every day, but you need to read something every day. I think that's what's important.
As I was reading through this, I love that you start off with kind of breaking apart the title, Racism 101. Because, of course, people are going to think that the reason you're putting this book together is all about race, you know? But as I was reading through there, and you start talking about how race is just intertwined in your life, and it's just a facet of your life that is added to who you become in the end. And I don't know if it was in this or in one of your many TED Talks that I have watched, but you talk about having like a plant in somebody's house, and that plant is going to absorb all of that negative energy. And I was just like, man, if we could have something that we could just pour all of that hatred into. Like, I think you said, and we'll turn it into spaghetti or something like that.
Probably knowing me.
But just the beauty and the elegance behind that thought process. Like, why do we have to have this divisiveness? Why can't we just think about the bigger goals in our world, you know? Like, think about those things that are going to impact our children's children.
Why can't you live your life and let me live
Yes.
mine? That'd be the easiest way. What are we getting out of teaching hatred?
Absolutely.
I don't think we get very much out of it.
They all just need that hatred plant in their house to absorb everything, right?
Absolutely.
So when you were a child, what did you feel? Because I know, like, Nikki Grimes, when I spoke with her, she had said that she had an interaction with James Baldwin. And she said that she happened to meet him one day, and she said, hey, I'm a poet. Can you look at this? And he looks through her works, and he says, oh, well, here's my phone number and address. Why don't you come, and I'll help you out. And she says that getting to meet James Baldwin and getting to work with him, that was inspirational in helping to push her to who she is now. And she said now she always wants to make sure that her pieces are James approved. Did you have anyone who is inspirational or influential in your life who helped push you to be the person you are today?
Me. My T-shirt, which they won't be able to see, it says essentially.
Let's zoom in
I
on
don't know
that.
if they can see it.
There we go. Life happens, dogs help. Oh, my grandmother would have loved that.
No, as I said, I've known I know Nikki, and I know Jimmy very well, and of course we did a show Soul.
I watched that as
Yeah,
well.
that was a wonderful show. But I think that there's this mistake that somehow or another there's some magic that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you're going to run into somebody and they're going to say, oh, you're brilliant. I'm going to take, that's why Bill Cosby ends up raping all those women, because they thought there was some magic.
Yeah.
And he said, well, come up to my room at midnight and I'll help your career. And then they get raped, and then it was like, well, he raped me. No, you raped yourself. Now, I don't mind if Bill went to jail. He could stay in jail. I don't have any problem. I don't know how to tell you that.
Yeah.
But I thought you got to be a fool to think that somehow or another there's going to be somebody out there that's going to go like, oh, yeah, you're wonderful. The only person that knows you're wonderful is you.
Yeah.
And the only person that you're going to be satisfied in terms of your writing is you. And I say to my students, I really try to teach that to them. You are your first reader. If it doesn't delight you, there's something wrong with it. You can't think about, oh, I wonder what my publisher will say. I wonder what. That's not why you write. If you want to do something like that, go get a job in a bank or something. Go get a job, at Amazon. Learn how to put. I said, learn how to put a stitch across a box. What do you think? You know, to put tape across a box or something. And I'm sure that what Grimes said was probably true for her. Jimmy was a very considerate man, and so I'm sure that having attention from Jimmy was probably helpful. But the most important person to have attention from is yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's not ego. That's just basic. You're writing because this is what you believe, and this is what you're willing actually to pay the price for. Martin gave a speech, because that's what he believed. And he knew, as we all do, nothing's free. So he's going to have to pay a price eventually for the speeches that he's given. We all do. I write books. He said, nobody's going to shoot me because I'm just a poet. But you do what you have to do. People take it or leave it. And I just hate it. I really do. And I'm getting to the point that I'm impatient with it. I hate the idea that I need somebody to inspire me. Well,
Yeah.
if you do, then you need to go do something else. You know, go sweep streets or go do something. If you can't know what you're doing while you're doing it, you shouldn't be doing it. And it's just that simple because you get tired of it. You ask me, well, how do we get these people together? We're never going to get. If we haven't gotten together in all of these years, we're not going to get together. But we owe. There are things that we owe. We owe the immigrants. And I just wrote a poem for the immigrants because I watch people. I come through the Charlotte airport. I don't fly much anymore. And they wanted to, most of the people in the women's bathroom, and I'm saying this because it was a box.
Mm-hmm.
And you should have dropped $1 in. That's what you do. You put $1 in, or you should have. And then somebody complained. I guess several people complained. And so they made the women, because these are going to be the Hispanic women. And they made them take it out. They said people were embarrassed about it. Now, what's embarrassing is that you go into the toilet and pee, and somebody has to wipe that up.
Yeah.
And you can't even drop $1 in.
Absolutely.
And she's underpaid. These women are underpaid. And these women have to go home and take care of children, take care of their mother. They have things. You can't drop $1 in. It embarrasses you. That's that kind of thing you're sick of. So people like me, I'm not only going to give the women the $1 because I do. It's not a lot.
Yeah.
You have the $1. If you haven't got a penny, a half penny will do. If you haven't got a half penny, God bless you. But I'm standing there. When I do that, I'm looking at the other women who are there washing their hands. And all of a sudden, everybody's, because of course you should. It's the little things that we refuse to do. Because we say, I didn't know you had to do it. Well, you damn well did know.
Yeah.
Don't hand me your innocence.
When I started putting together these interviews, I had a discussion with some of my kids, and I was like, I want my kids to be able to see all facets, all career areas, and I want them to be able to see themselves in that successful path. And as we were going through, and I told my kids, well, you guys can do some of the interviews with the people here in our school. One of my kids raises his hand, and he hasn't spoken very much this year, and he says, well, I would really like to interview Miss Kathy because I feel that she is one of the most under thought of people, even though she's one of the most inspirational. And the fact that he knew of our janitorial staff and he knew her name and he was able to say, I don't care who else you're going to interview, but for me, I want to interview her because she's making a difference.
See, that's wonderful. Then you're
Yeah.
a good teacher. I mean, that, not that you're a good teacher, but that you have taught one student.
Yes, one student, and that's what you have to look for, right? It happens to be Women's History Month. I'm going to be focusing on women right now. It doesn't mean that I don't want to address everybody else, but I want to focus on women so that those women get that 50 minutes in the sun. You know what I mean?
I do. But you remember when they asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when they asked Ruth, how many women, because they were complaining, how many women do you think should be on the Supreme Court? And she said 9. And some,
Yeah.
And her interviewer said, well, 9 women. She said there'd been 9 men.
Yeah.
Oh,
Why not?
I just love Ruth. I'm sorry Ruth couldn't live forever.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, go get them, girl. Because nobody thought that was unusual
Yeah.
for 9 men. But when she said 9 women, everybody's like, what?
And it's like in some of my classes, I'm talking to some of my kiddos, and I'm like, even if you're thinking, I don't want to go down this path, I don't want to do honors because it might be extra work, think about your representation. Think about how other people are going to say, well, there used to only be 3 people of color in your class,
Right.
and now we've got 7. And then you're going to see more people, because why can't it be all? You know what I mean? When you have a student population that's 60 or 70% Black and Hispanic, why do we not have 60 or 70% Black and Hispanic in our honors classes?
Exactly.
Because that would be an equal distribution.
Yep.
And so I love that. Why can't we have 9?
Why can't we have 9? I love it. She's brilliant, though, everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is kind of a personal question. I was watching one of your TED Talks recently, and you talked about realizing that you had become the oldest person in your family. How did that change you? Because, I mean, for me, like, when my grandmother passed, my auntie was like, I now realize that I'm the matriarch of the family. And, I mean, it changes your perspective. How did that change things for you?
It's a funny feeling. I don't even know how to say it, because my mother died, and then my sister died about 4 weeks later. Mommy died in June. My sister died in July. And my middle aunt died in October. But that still left my baby aunt. And she was there. We spent a lot of time, because I really liked Ag. Well, I liked all of them. Ag and I spent a lot of time together. And she was over, and I had to have a photo session. And my cousin Pat, I only have one girl cousin, we're a family of men actually. And Pat was there. And we were talking, and we realized Agnes is the baby of the Watsons. I'm the baby of the Giovannis. And Pat is the baby of the Fords. That's her family. And I said, oh, we got to have a photo. We did. We had the photographers there. I said, you have to take a picture, because these are all 3 babies. And then, of course, when Ag died, that left me. And Pat called me, and she said, you realize you're the oldest person now, so I have to ask you this. You don't think about it that way. I mean, I'm not trying to run anybody's business, but it was just funny to all of a sudden realize that you are the elder, because you're not, hopefully you're not going to be the last one, that the others are going to be there. But it's just a funny feeling. There are things that you have to do. Pat is much better than I am at remembering birthdays. We all toast our mothers. Her mother was born January the 5th, and my mother's born January 5th. Hers was born January the 6th. And so we call each other and have a champagne toast for the mothers. And she keeps up with all of that. I'm not good at keeping up with that, but I'm good at, if we're needing something, I'm there because my grandmother was there. It's
Yeah.
one of those, like, oh, I have to go.
My grandmother passed away recently, and I know her sisters, it was kind of similar to what you said. It was one after the next, and it was within about 3 years, there's one left. And she keeps saying, well, we're going to come visit you, and she, every birthday, every anniversary, she's tried to make that attempt, and I'm just like, that has to be exhausting. Like, we should be reaching out to you. We should be coming to you, But it's like all of the lives just keep spinning and spinning, and
That's
at the
funny
end of
feel.
it,
I mean,
yeah.
and then you realize, oh, so mathematically speaking, I'm the next. And then all of a sudden, well, the clock is ticking, and that's what's funny. You don't, because you never think about it when you're young person, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, the clock is ticking, and it's on this side, and there's not that much time left.
Yeah.
And so you live your life as you see fit. We've all done, and you hope to make the people that love you proud of you. And I love Knoxville, and I say that all the time. But despite you coming here, it's a very different place, but it means a lot to me emotionally. I was talking to Jenny. We were talking about Avon Rollins, and I don't know if you knew Avon. He was a classmate of mine. We were just talking about the people that I knew, Jamesina West, and then my mother's friends. They're all gone, but the spirit is still here, and that's what. It's the spirit. You're not dead. We just lost a friend. He was 98. And what I tend to say lately is he was only 98. Because I was saying,
Yes.
he was only 98. But one of the things we were just talking about is that you're not dead. I was talking to his nephew, Sandy, and Sandy was saying, well, I miss Uncle Ashley, and I said, well, you're not dead, and that's true, until you're forgotten. And we'll never forget Ashley, so we don't have to worry. He'll never die. He's going to always be with us. He was an artist. But mostly he was a good man, and there are very few good people, no matter what the gender. Excuse me, very, very few good people. And we're just never going to forget him. And so, you think about yourself and say, well, my body will, because the body will pass. But you think, well, I hope I've done something that makes sense, and the spirit leaves on.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know my kiddos, I'll write and I'll be doing one of my models and I'll be like, including my grandmother. And so when we're talking about her and they're saying, well, why are you doing all of this in first person, present tense? And I said, because I want to relive that moment. Like, that moment was life-changing for me, And then we'll be talking about something else and they'll say, oh, is that a grandma moment? And I'm like, I love that my kiddos are getting stories of my grandmother who many people don't know, but now they're going to be singing the songs that I was singing, and
that's very important.
Just seeing it all get passed around and those little stories, how they can change people's lives.
It makes a difference. Really.
Absolutely. Well, I was wondering, since you have such a prolific group of writing, like you just have so many books, so many different talks you've done, so many inspirational meetings with people that you have had. Do you have any of them that you just wish, man, I could have spent my time better if I had just avoided that one meeting? I know that's kind of a hard question, but
I'm not good at regrets.
Yeah.
And so I think my sister's gone, but I think if you talk to her, she might have said, "Oh, she should have done," or "Wish she had done." I think if I maybe, but then I think that I did the right thing. Grandmother wanted all of her grandchildren to learn to play the piano. We had a piano. That's unusual for a black family in those times. And when we were all, my two cousins and I, before my other two cousins were born, we would all go, William and Terry and my sister and I would go down and spend the summer with grandmother. And she would call us in, one at a time, and teach us piano. And William ultimately he's a really good saxophone player. He's passed now. My sister was really good at piano. She was a great piano player, in fact, and she could sing. She could, she was artistic. She could do things. And my cousin Terry could play the piano. He wasn't that good, but he could sing, and he did that. And so when she's calling me, right, because she's calling one at a time, and we're learning to do whatever it is she's teaching. And she called me in, I don't know, maybe the second time or something like that, because she had said, practice. I think I remember middle C.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to do something. And grandmother had that yellow pencil, I don't know if you remember. And I hit the wrong note. And she hit my hand. Grandmother.
Yeah. Tap you on the
not
hand.
Brutal, she hit my. And I remember that so well. As I said, grandmother, if you're going to be abusive, I'm not going to sit here. And grandma just looked, because nobody ever, she said abusive.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be damned. I got up. And so I don't know that I regret it, because maybe if I had learned to play the piano, I would have done something else. But I got up and said, that's abusive, and I'm not taking it. And I left. Never did learn the piano. And I'm kind of sorry about that, I think, because it would have been, I love music, but.
Yeah. Speaking up to grandmothers, though, that's not ever the best choice.
I don't ever wish to be hit.
I remember the first time my husband met my grandmother, we get into her house and I say, hey, do you want a sandwich? Do you want something to eat? And he says, no, I'm fine. My grandma walks in and she says, well, are you hungry, baby? Can I get you something to eat? And my husband goes, yeah, I would love a sandwich. And she looks at me and she's like, Jade, why would you bring a guest into my house and not offer to feed him? And I was just, it was downhill from there. I was like, I don't know what you were thinking, lying to my grandmother, but that is not acceptable. Because of course I couldn't say anything. I just had to be like, yes, ma'am, I'll go make that sandwich right now, because you don't talk back to a grandma.
No, you don't. And I never did. I mean, grandmother and I came back and lived with her. We got we always got along. But and she and I laughed about that. The older we got, she said, I abusive." I said, "Grandmother, that was the word. That was abusive to hit me because I didn't know that note." And I was trying to teach her, "Grandmother, we're not going to have." And well, she and I were very funny pair, actually. We're not going to have this discussion. Because there's no point in having it. I'm old and you're not going to teach me.
That's
and I'm
funny.
going to go on and do it. Abusive. She never got over that. She never did.
I love that.
I wish I had asked Grandpapa what. They were quite a couple. But I wish I had asked him what he thought of all of that.
Yeah.
Because he was very quiet man. So I know that she had something to say that, Nikki said, I know he had something to say to her about it. No, we're not going to hit Nikki for missing the note. No, she had said, "Honey, you missed the note. Now it's here." I would be sitting there right now trying to please her with that note.
Trying to play that piano again.
I adored Grandmother, but I thought, no, this is not how we teach.
Hey, but you learned a life lesson from that. I mean, you don't go around hitting your students with a pencil.
I have one son, and I don't know. It's just not the way you teach.
And the way that you describe your grandmother and grandfather in this book, I mean, it's so beautiful. So beautiful. Like you talk about, there's something about that. I illustrate whenever I read, so please don't judge all of the pictures. It was something about him and the constellations and her being grounded. And it's just the way that you're able to tell stories and there we go. You said, he being black and all in 1905 or thereabouts, Grandpa loves the stars. He knew the constellations and the gods who formed them, for whom they were named. Grandpa was 20 years the senior and of grandmother, so he was an old man when we were born. Grandmother's passion was flowers and his constellations. One needn't have a great imagination to envision this courtship. The one with her feet firmly planted on the earth, the other with his heart in the sky. And so with what you're saying about how someone is not forgotten until you no longer remember them, that's when they finally are passed away. I mean, you've immortalized your family and the people who you cared about most through storytelling. And your stories, I mean, the way that you're able to weave them into poetry, it's so beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So beautiful.
They tickle me, Grandmother and Grandpa. And no, I said that in one of my latest books. Everything I know about love, I learned from them.
Yeah.
Because she loved pineapple. And he never let her go to the grocery store. It used to, not the grocery, it used to be market.
Yeah.
And he would go to the market on Saturday. And I remember him coming home on the Saturdays that they had it. I don't like pineapple, and I like vanilla ice cream. And he makes great. The only ice cream I eat, we were talking about that yesterday with someone else. The only ice cream I eat is the one that I make because he made it. I made, even right now we're sitting here. Somebody said you want ice cream. I don't eat anybody else, and it's not personal. It's just that that's not what I do. And I remember him coming, and we lived on 400 was up, and I remember him coming. He would be right up at the bottom of the steps. Her name was Louvenia. And he'd say, "Louvenia, they had pineapple." And he had the groceries, but he'd be holding the pineapple. And she would start beaming. And I said, "Oh, that's what love is. Louvenia, I brought you pineapple." It's the reason that I fell in love with The Godfather. Because if you remember Godfather Part 2, if you remember Vito comes home and he has the pear. And so watching him give his wife, but he just puts it on the table, that pear, you know that he's a good man. And I know I've seen The Godfather 850,000 times. I can quote because I love it. But watching that, I thought that was just brilliant. Watching him give her that pear. He loved something. And I remember watching my grandfather, Louvenia, they had pineapple. And my thought was like, oh, no, now we're going to have to, I know what he's going to do. He's going to make pineapple ice cream. Because that's what she liked. I was just a granddaughter, so. Not me.
Oh, yeah. In my family, my grandmother never liked chocolate, so every get-together we had, although everyone else loved chocolate, there was no chocolate on the tables. Like that, Grandma didn't like chocolate, so we don't eat chocolate.
Yeah, you're right.
Um,
I understand.
so another, I guess this goes back to another one of your TED Talks that I saw. You had talked about how you really enjoy Harry Potter. I have my entire classroom Harry Potter themed. I do like a house cups, and we do different competitions between my classes. And what you pulled out about the Dementors and chocolate, and then tying it back into your poetry. How are you able to interweave so many different genres of literature and just have that one tiny, like, okay, the Dementor's kiss, something that is supposed to be darkness personified, can be solved by chocolate, you know, and then you tie it into a poem talking about like hatred and the world today. I mean, is there any inspiration or anything that you can share? Because I mean, I want to be a writer. You know, I love poetry. It's my passion. Do you have any ideas or words for wisdom?
You know, it's been so long since I read, and I only read the first maybe 3 books of Harry Potter, and then it became The Godfather. I was a history major.
Yeah.
And The Godfather, which I was 50 years old, has so much history. And when you read, when you see part 3, because Puzo wrote the movie part 3, but it's not in the book. You're getting the Catholic Church and the scandal and the murder of John Paul. And so that's something I remember better than I do. I remember enjoying Harry Potter, and my son, who was 51, so I was probably reading Potter because he was reading.
Oh yeah. I've reread them all with my kids. Yes, I understand.
So I'm not as familiar. Plus, I didn't see the movies.
Oh yeah.
Because I didn't see the point. The Godfather I've read and reread and reread because it's history.
Yeah.
And there's always something. If you ever look, for example, at The Godfather Part 3, you'll see that it opens with a man hanging. There's a man, he's just hanging, spinning. And, you know, to me, I don't know, nobody said it, but to me that's a shout out to Judas.
Yeah.
Because that's what Judas did when he was a traitor to Christ. But they don't say anything, it's just that he's there, and then they open the movie. And Michael is being inducted into something in the church. So, I'm just saying to say the reason that I remember The Godfather is the history. And I applaud J.K. Rowling. I'm happy for her. You know, I don't know her. But I don't remember as much about. I guess I'd have to reread. I have a grandchild, but I guess I'd have to reread Harry Potter to see what it is that connected.
Yeah.
Because at this point, I don't remember it the same.
Do you just jot down notes in a diary, or like when it sparks something in you, or?
Sometimes if I'm remembering, and it all depends on it. But if I have a note, I don't go to bed anymore, and I used to, but I don't do it now, without a pad. Because in the middle of the night, you wake up and you're thinking something.
Yes.
And you say, well, I'm going to write about that. I'm going to get that in the morning. And in the morning, you just know, I had a great line.
Oh.
It won't come back. So I have my pad, and I write the line, you know.
I've got mine right here.
No, you have to. Otherwise
I keep it right next to, and my daughter got me this, and she said, Mommy, you always have those ideas. You should have them next to you.
Yeah.
And, I mean, being able to just be like, well, I have this amazing idea, and if you don't get it out there,
it's gone.
It's gone.
You wake up in the morning and it's gone.
It's gone.
And
well, to close this out, do you have any advice or any spark notes to leave any of my students with? I'm teaching middle grades ELA. Any words of inspiration that have helped you on the path to where you are today?
Well, as I said, I read. I'm always reading, and I'm interested in nonfiction. I'm interested in Mother Nature. I'm interested in the water. A lot of things. But my favorite book. This is a long way to say. My favorite book is Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, and that's another one that I could probably quote.
Yeah.
And little Timothy is sick, and so Mrs. Frisbee is going to have to go out. She's a single mother at this point, and we don't know why she's single. We don't find out until 3/4 of the book. And she's going to have to go out and have the entire community help her. I love that. And I think you have to let yourself recognize that we listen to music over and over again. So we can read books. It's not, oh, I read that book. You read it again.
Absolutely.
We do the same thing with songs. It's like, oh, I heard that song. We listen to because it brings us pleasure, and every time we hear something different. So I'm going to say enjoy. I'm going to say read, but enjoy reading. Read something that you enjoy, and keep it with you. You know, keep it with you. And I think that's it's difficult. Middle school, you know, life is going to be difficult until you get into your middle 20s or so.
Yes.
And so you have to. There's nothing worse than teenage years.
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely.
but you have to
Absolutely.
go through them to get to the rest of it. So
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
it's
I
my
really
pleasure.
appreciate you making